Shalom, and welcome to What the Watchman Sees, a ministry that will sift through all of the social media noise to show you news of importance from the Most High's perspective. As watchmen, we are here both to warn of dangers and give biblical answers for dwelling in the secret place of the Most High during these times of confusion. Tell your family and friends to like, share, and subscribe as we delve into what Yahweh has for us, the apple of his eye. Let's get to work. Say Shabbat Shalom as we enter into a time of meditation on this Shabbat. And as those of you who follow the study know, we've been in Proverbs. We're going to take today to once again reflect on why we're in Proverbs and some of the larger biblical and societal reasons for looking at the book of Proverbs, specifically the precepts that are found in it. So the Most High is encouraging us to study, to show ourselves approved unto him, workmen who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And that's according to 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, all scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the person of the Most High may be complete, thoroughly furnished to every good work. So with those scriptures in mind, we're going to do a quick review of where we were last time, and then we'll go ahead and talk about Ephesians for our lesson on today. Last time we were in Proverbs chapter 17, and these are some of the highlights. We talked about how a dry morsel is better in quietness than a house full of feasting with strife. The fact that one who mocks the poor insults their maker. We know that the maker is the Most High himself. A rebuke cuts into a man of discernment deeper than 100 lashes into a fool. If anyone returns evil for good, evil will never leave his house. Acquitting the guilty and condemning the righteous, both are detestable to the Most High. And then from the standpoint of the person sitting in a position of authority and leadership, as we continually remind ourselves, these words were given from one king to a future king. And he was to use those words of encouragement, those words of instruction, to be a just ruler in his capacity as the king over the Most High's people. And so that these proverbs are proverbs that are to be dealt with as an individual, but ultimately for the collective group of the Most High's people, so that the Most High's people can have a thriving and prosperous kingdom that is a model and a light to the rest of the world. So it all begins, as we have said over and over again, in the individual home, but the king has a home too. And so the king, being right, is able then to facilitate righteousness to the rest of the nation, and then the nation becomes righteous. So we've continually given the encouragement that the Most High's people do need leaders. We don't need people individually going about doing whatever they think is right. That's a prescription for chaos, which is the state that our community is currently in, which is one of the reasons we're doing this study. And the study is focused on the community that is under the most stress and duress. So having said that, every once in a while, it's good to step back and get a better sense of why we're looking at these things. And that leads us to the fact that all of this is pointing us back to having a true relationship with the Most High, which cannot happen without Yeshua, without Jesus the Christ. He's the one that is able to manifest in a perfect way what we are reading in the Proverbs. Okay. And so it's all about him, but he's all about us. That's what our studies are designed to do. It's to give us a sense of how much the Most High loved us by giving his nature, his way of doing things, and seeing how he wants it to be through the eyes of his son, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, so that we can be conformed to his image and do the same thing. Not only do the same thing, but do the same thing with the same power that Yeshua had. So every once in a while, it's good for us to remember that none of this works without Jesus. The Proverbs have been around forever. The Torah has been around since the beginning of the second, not the second, but yes, the beginning of the rebuilding of the second temple. So the notion of all of these ancient precepts being able to be carried out the way that the Most High wanted them is a worthy goal, but we can't do it without having the Spirit of the Most High in us doing it. Yeshua shows us how that works and what the ramifications are. So again, during this study, we're going to be looking at our assignment now from the perspective of Yeshua having come in the flesh, as John chapter 1 verse 14 says, the word became flesh, lived among us. We beheld his glory. The glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And so, and then we see after he was crucified, he was risen from the dead, and he is now seated at the right hand of the Most High. He gave his instructions for life to what we call the apostles. And so we're going to be looking at one of the apostles who was born out of season, the apostle called Paul, Shaul, who was a Hebrew of Hebrews. First of all, he was from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was the apostle that was born out of season. He's the one that was on the road to Damascus to persecute the church of Jesus, of Yeshua, and had that encounter with Yeshua. So as he is doing his ministry, he gets to this book that he writes, or this letter that he writes to the Ephesians. So that's where we're going to pick up our study on today, as a study of reflection. But all of this has to do with how do we live out the words that are given from the king to his son in Proverbs. So in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 11, so Ephesians chapter 6 starting at verse 10, it says, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, or in the Most High, and in the power of his might. Verse 11, put on the whole armor of Yahuwah, or God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Verse 12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So those couple of verses are the ones that we're going to focus on today. And so it starts out by saying, first of all, in verse 10, we are to be strong. Now, why are we looking at Ephesians in this particular moment in time? It's because we need the strength of the Most High in this time. The world is under judgment. The nations are under judgment. Our communities are under judgment, and that judgment will destroy. That's why it's here, because of the wickedness of us as human beings. So for those who belong to the kingdom, We are being told while all of this is going on, while you're seeing your loved ones, your friends, your enemies crumble and buckle under the pressure that's on everyone, including us, we're told to be strong in this hour, in this time, not strong in our own abilities, but strong in the power and the might of the Most High. This is the time for the Most High's people to shine. This is the time for the brightness of his coming should be able to be seen through us, his people. So how does that happen? We have to be a people that are putting on the whole armor of the Most High so that we may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. That word wiles means the trickery. We're in a huge magic situation right now. Everything that you see, especially in on the television set, especially in social media, it's all trickery. It's all the working of magic. It's all based on these spells that are being imposed upon the world and on us as people. So while the judgment of the Most High is going on, the trickery of the wiles of the devil are also going on because the devil is still here. The devil has not been completely taken out of the picture. So it's very important for the Most High's people to know the difference between the judgment of the Most High and the tricks of Satan or the wiles of the devil. Well, how are we to know that? We need to come to grips with the fact that once we became a part of the kingdom of heaven, we entered into a state of war. We are currently in a state of war. And just because the people group that we are a part of refuses to acknowledge that, that doesn't mean that war is not being waged against us. That is why Ephesians is there. For those who have the understanding, we have been encouraged through the apostle Shaul, Paul, to put on the armor of the Most High because we are in a state where we have to fight. You can't fight if you don't know you're in a war. And you can't fight the war without the proper war tools. And that's why we're stepping back so that we can understand we are no longer under the jurisdiction of anything and everything we as individuals can do. We're under the jurisdiction of there are consequences for walking outside of the will of the Most High. And those consequences are dire. It's a life and death situation. That's where we are. Okay. So we literally have people plotting against us to destroy us. And I'm not going to go into those examples right now, but that's why we're starting or we're looking at Ephesians, because it does no good to talk about going back and rebuilding if you don't understand, as our ancestors did, that when we go back to rebuild, we're going back in a hostile environment. We're building in a hostile environment. So if we're acting as if everything is fine, we're going to be continually overrun by the enemy, because the enemy knows who we are. The enemy knows what we're doing, and the enemy's primary task is to stop us from doing it. Okay. So that's why the apostle Shaul comes in and he says, y'all need to get your armor on because you're in a battle. Okay. So that's where verse 11 is. Put on the whole armor of Yahuwah that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. See, it doesn't talk about confront head on. It says stand against the wiles. What are wiles? They're tricks. The devil is a whisperer. That's what his name. That's one of the the ways that the devil is described, or Hasatan is described. He's the whisperer. He's the one who whispers into the ear. What is it that he's whispering into the ear? That which will lead us away from the center of the will of the Most High. Okay, so Paul knows that, and that's why he says what he does in Ephesians 6:11. Verse 12 says, now here's the deal, people of the Most High. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high. The word places is actually not there. So you could say in the heights. Okay. So the wrestling that we are engaged in is, let me say it as plain as I can, it's not about the human beings coming against us. The human beings coming against us are the tools. They're the flesh. So that's why he says we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. Our main battle is not with white supremacy. Our main battle is not against youngsters in the community shooting their guns off and making the community miserable. Our main battle is against those principalities, against those powers, against the rulers of all of those flesh and blood individuals, the rulers of the darkness of this world. We're actually fighting against darkness and spiritual wickedness. So what we're going to do is just spend a little bit of time looking these words up, okay? Wrestle, the word wrestle, when it says we wrestle not, if you were to look that, when we look that word up in the concordance, it means a contest between two in which each endeavors to throw the other and which is decided. See, it's a nice way of saying we're in a war, okay, and we have an opponent. And so that's why we're being told when we're in this war, we're not wrestling. We don't have an opponent that's flesh and blood. Our opponent is not, okay? So that's why it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And if you look up the word flesh, it means just that. The Greek word actually has to do, I mean, if you look up the root Greek word, it has to do with that which is brushed off, like dead skin. Okay, because again, our people were very practical and hands-on when it came to understanding things of the scriptures. So it's actually talking about the soft tissue of a human being. So we're not wrestling against people who have blood in them, okay? But we're wrestling against principalities. Now, that word principality is defined at, first of all, it's a feminine noun, and it's defined as the beginning or the origin. Okay, so what we're wrestling against is something that has been going on from the very beginning. So it says the person or thing that commences, the first person or thing in a series, the leader, okay, or that by which anything begins to be. So our wrestling against is that which was from the beginning. We're right back to the garden. Well, actually, we're back even further than the garden, and we'll see that in just a second. Okay, so we'll just keep going. So we're wrestling against principalities. That's the word that we just looked up, and the Greek word is arche or arche. Okay, like ark. Okay, which is the very first, or the word principle is the same root as prime. Okay, so the origin, like we said. Okay, so we're wrestling against principalities, and then it says powers. Okay, so if you look that word up, powers means the power of choice, the liberty of doing as one pleases, being given leave or permission. Okay. Another way of expressing it, the ability or strength with which one is endued, which he either possesses or exercises. So it's an authority. Okay. So principalities and powers is the same thing as principalities and the ability to do what you want to do. That is what we're wrestling against. Okay. That's how do you do that? You have authority to do that. You have a right, you have the privilege of doing that. And so that's where, on a larger scale, it's the power of rule or government. Remember Isaiah 9:6 when it says, the government shall be upon the shoulders of the Messiah. Well, we're living under the rule or the power or the government that is on the shoulders of those who are trying to kill us. So when we look at the rule or the government, it's talking about a worldwide situation that is actually playing itself out in real time in real geographical locations. Okay, but basically it's authority over mankind. So that's what that word is talking about. So against principalities, against powers, against the rulers, and that word is cosmocrator.
Strong's G 2888, cosmocrator. Cosmocrator.
Okay, cosmocrator. So rulers, what does that word mean? The Lord of the world, the prince of this age, the devil and his demons. That's so when you see the rulers of the darkness of this world, that's who it's talking about. It's talking about the Lord of this age. The word world and age are synonyms. Okay. So it's not talking about, again, now here it's not talking about a geographical location. It's talking about an age. Okay. So we're living in an age where the prince of this age is that who is against us. All right. And that prince of this age has been described as the devil and his demons. Okay. So principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world or age. And by the way, that Greek word in age is aeon. Okay, you've probably seen the word eon. That's a long period of time. Okay, that's what an age is, and that's what, when you see world in the Bible, that's what that word actually means. Okay, and then it says spiritual wickedness, but the word spiritual is pneumatikos. And when you look that word up, it's relating to the human spirit or the rational soul as part of the man, which is akin to God and serves as his instrument or organ, serves as God's instrument or organ. It's a little less complicated than those words. Basically, that which is non-carnal, in other words, that which is not primarily flesh and blood, ethereal, for instance, a spirit, okay, something that is supernatural. Spiritual actually has to do with belonging, again, relating to the human spirit, belonging to a spirit or a being higher than man. I should have read that first, but inferior to God. Okay, so it's supernatural. It's higher than us as natural human beings, but it's not God. Okay, so the spiritual is actually part of who we are, but not all of who we are. All right, because this does not include the flesh and blood. All right. And then it could also mean belonging to the divine spirit or God, the Holy Spirit. Okay. So that's all that is implied in spiritual. So when we say, well, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not a religious person. Yeah, I've heard people say that recently. Um, well, sort of, because all of us are spiritual people, right? Um, we all have a spirit, and we all have access to the spiritual realm. We'll come back to that because that's going to come up throughout our study. We just talked about spiritual. Then wickedness is pretty much what you would think it is. Okay. Depravity, iniquity, malice, evil purposes, and desires. So all of those things are described in the spiritual realm. See, the depravity doesn't start in the flesh, it starts in the spirit. Evil purposes don't start in the flesh, they start in the spirit. And the way that they start in the spirit has to do with that the order that we saw: principalities, powers, rulers, all of that has again, principalities is that which was from the beginning. So when we act in a depraved way, we are acting according to what happened from the very beginning. So it's in us now. All right. So what the scriptures are telling us is we now have to understand that we're not wrestling against human beings. We're wrestling against things that have happened from the very beginning, powers that have their own will and their own mind, but they have rulership of the darkness of this age. Remember when Yeshua was tempted in the wilderness? What the last temptation, the devil said, he took him up into a high mountain. No, the second to the last. He took him up into a high mountain and said, look at all of these societies. Look at all of these kingdoms. I'll let you be in charge of all of them because charge of them was given to me. Well, how did he get them? He got them because of the man and the woman sinning in the garden. And once they sinned, he was then given charge over what they were given charge over. See, the kingdoms of the world are all supposed to be ruled by the kings from heaven. When the man and the woman sinned, that rulership was transferred to who we call Satan or the devil. All right. And all of that happened in the heavenly realm. That's where we have to start thinking in terms of how we got where we are now and how to get out of where we are now. So if it's going on in the heavenly realm, it has to be addressed in the heavenly realm. So when we put on the whole armor, we're putting on the whole armor. The battleground is this age and this earth. But really what we're doing is we're wrestling against or fighting against the very beginning acts of rebellion that started before the man and the woman were ever even created. See, we're a part of this continuum. Okay, so wanted to talk about that, and now we'll go back and review that. Okay, so we just read it. Okay, we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against principalities, and again, that Greek word arche, or it's the beginning of a thing. We're wrestling against that which was from the beginning. We're the powers, exousia, one who has authority over others. Okay, that's who we're wrestling against. How did that one get the authority? By our sinning. Okay, how did that one convince us to sin? Whispering in the ear, the wiles of Satan. Okay, the rulers, Cosmocrator, which is the Lord of the Word, the Prince of this age. That's what the ruler is. It's the Prince of this age. The Prince of this age is not Yeshua. He's the King of Kings. The Prince of this age is our enemy against the darkness skotos, and again, well, we didn't talk in these words, but it has to do with shadiness, obscurity, literally or figuratively, darkness, ignorance, respecting divine things and human duties. So when we're wrestling against darkness, we're actually wrestling against ignorance, not someone else's ignorance, our own ignorance. Okay. Yeah, and it just occurred to me to mention, see, these things are given to us not so that we can look at someone else, because these are spiritual conditions. This is given to us so that we will look inside to find these things inside of us. Okay, so that we can overcome the prince of this age, the ruler of this age in us, individually and in our families and in our nation. Okay, so the darkness, that's why Yeshua said, if your eye is single, your body's full of light. But if your eye is full of darkness, how great is that darkness? Okay, that happens on the inside of us. All right. So when we're wrestling against darkness, shadiness, obscurity that's in us first. Okay. The word world is the same Greek word as aeon or aion, and it's properly translated an age, by extension, perpetuity. In other words, a long period of time. Okay. So that's different than us seeing the word world and thinking of the earth. This is talking about an age. We're coming into another age. We're also witnessing the destruction of the current age. That, so when we hear the idea that the world is coming to an end, this age is what is coming to an end. The earth's going to be here. Okay. The question, and we're going to be here. Okay. But the question is, how are we going to be here? Are we going to be here as children of the Most High and in his kingdom and ruling and reigning with him? Or are we going to be those who are here in outer darkness, weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth? It's all happening on the same planet, by the way, but it's the next age that's coming. And that's why these studies are given to prepare us for the age to come, for the world to come. I'll just leave that, and we'll periodically come back to that thought, because it has great ramification. And then finally, the spiritual wickedness, that spiritual is relating to the human spirit, the rational soul. It's part of the man, which is akin to God, but is lower than God. You made him a little lower than the angels. Okay, what is man that you regard him? Okay, that man is spirit. Okay, but we also are flesh, and flesh and blood is not going to be able to enter this next age. Only that which is of the spirit will be entering the next age. Spiritual wickedness, we talked about spirit wickedness, paneria. That's the depravity piece. That's the being full of malice, sinful. Okay. When you think of the word wicker chair, and you know what a wicker chair looks like, if you can picture that in your mind, what makes a wicker chair strong is the weaving in and out of the materials to make something that's strong. Well, that weaving in and out is the same root word as wicked. Okay, it's crooked. They become crooked to become strong. Okay, now so that's in a positive sense. In a negative sense, wickedness is like that. It's extremely strong. Okay, because it weaves in and out of our souls. And that's what makes us depraved. Okay. So that's what we're fighting against. So when we talk about going back and rebuilding, we're talking about rebuilding things straight and not in a wicked way. Okay. And then wickedness, spiritual wickedness in high. Now, in the King James Version, it says high places, but actually that word places is not there. So in the high, what's high? Epuranius, which is the from one of the parts of, it's a two-part word, but one of the parts is Uranus, and then epi means outside of. Okay, so again, it's in the heavenly realm. So that's where these things are taking place. Now, we haven't talked a lot about this, but there are several ways of understanding heaven. And that's because there are several heavens. Okay, there's more than one heaven. If you remember, the scriptures say in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, well, one of those heavenly regions is that which is right above, which is what we call the sky. But then there's another one that's above the sky, and that's where the angels abide. And then above them is the heavenly sanctuary. Okay. Now, that's important for us to understand, because what's going on that we are fighting here on the earth is actually primarily going on in the heavenly realm first. And that's why we can't allow ourselves to be overcome with the evil that's right in front of us, because the evil that's right in front of us is being controlled from heaven, from the heavenly realm. See, we think that everything that's bad is coming out of hell. That's a whole nother lesson. But according to how this is being given to the church, there is a spiritual realm in the heavenly. If you remember, Satan was cast out of heaven. Why? Because he got into a fight, okay, and he lost. All right, and there were other angels with him. If you go back to Genesis chapter 6, what you will find, okay, it says, verse 1, and it came to pass, I want to make sure this is on there. Okay, good. And it came to pass when men, human beings, began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God, or the Elohim, the sons of Elohim, saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, I understand that this is what I'm about to say is controversial. I'm sorry, that's the word that I was looking for. But when you look at the phrase "sons of God" in any other place but this one, it's always talking about angels. That's the only reason I'm bringing this up. And I would suggest to you that in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, this is talking about angels too. It says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, I would suggest to you this taking was by force. Okay. Why do I say that? Because what's one of the first things in conquering another land that the conquerors will do after they kill the men, or while they're killing the men, they will take the daughters of those men and rape them, the wives of those men, and rape them. I would suggest to you that this is the same. Where did they get that from? They got it from the primary place where this evil thought came from, those angels that were out of their place. Those are the same angels, by the way, that are spoken about in Jude, but that's a whole nother lesson. My point is, that's the origin of the Most High having a realm that the angels are lower than. These angels, well, okay. Remember when Satan is called the prince of the power of the air? That's what I'm talking about. What's going on in that air? Wickedness and evil. That's what's going on. So when we're in our struggles, we have to understand that the human beings that we may be fighting against are actually being controlled by these same angels. They never died. See, that's another thing that they don't teach you. The angels that cause the problems are still around. All right, and causing all kind of hell, which is why actually this age or the earth is going to have to suffer under fire. Because all of this stuff that's gone on has gone on to the point where many people are going to have to die, just like they did in Sodom and Gomorrah, just like happened in the flood. So we're in another one of those inflection points, if you will, because evil has gotten so bad. But those of us who are wanting to be in the will of the Most High need to understand the origin of these things so that we don't lose our minds and start acting in ways that are ungodly and unprofitable. So that's why we wanted to share that. Now, so once more, why are we looking at these things? We're looking at these things. Let me stop the screen. We're looking at these things because you can't build on a incorrect foundation. This that we just looked at is where evil came from. It manifested itself eventually in the man and the woman, but evil came from a rebellious spirit. There's more that we could talk about, but we'll go ahead and leave it there, and maybe we'll pick it up again the next time. So the Father bless you and keep you. The Father make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Father lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom.